Welcome to Autodesk Inventor Lesson 3. This lesson will build on the things that we covered in the first two lessons, so if you haven't watched those, it might be a good idea to go back and do that now. I will put links to those in the description below. Now, if you've been following along with those two lessons, you should have enough foundation that we can move a little more quickly through some parts of this, so I won't spend quite as much time explaining things as I did in previous lessons. But in this lesson, we're going to draw this part, and let me wipe this off the screen, and we'll get started. Over here on the left, we will click New to start a new part. I'm going to go back to my English templates as we did before and use the standard inch IPT, Inventor Part template. Create that, start with our blank canvas, start a 2D sketch, back to the XY plane. That orients us to the front view of that plane. Last time we used the 2-point rectangle. This time let's use the 2-point center rectangle, where instead of two opposite corners, we define the center point and then one corner. Click that, come down to the origin to place our center, and as we move the mouse outward from that, we get an adjustable rectangle that comes up. See, it has dimensions on it. Let's go ahead and directly input our dimensions there. Notice the bottom dimension is highlighted at this point. Put a 3.0 there, hit tab. It pops off the screen. We can't see it right now, but we know the height is ready to be entered, and 2.0 for the height. Zoom out a little bit so we can see that. Right click, say OK to get out of rectangle mode. Right click again and say Finish 2D Sketch. Zoom out again so we can see the whole thing. We will extrude a solid as we did in lesson 2, and let's make this one 2.5 inches. Now we have a solid block to work with, and we're ready to start making some modifications to it. Click on this front face, start 2D Sketch. This time we will use the 2-point rectangle. I want to use the, zoom in a little bit, I want to use the top line, come down and to the right, sketch in that rectangle, right click and say OK. Now let's put some dimensions on it. Use our dimension command, come off the bottom edge of the block to the bottom line of that rectangle. Make that 750, 0.750. Now I need to dimension both sides of this rectangle. Of course, I can just come in here. Let's make this 750 as well. Now I can make this 750, or I can see where this is highlighted, ready to edit. Just come over here and click this other 750 that's up on the screen. See how that changes to D5. This is D6 that we're entering right now, dimension 6. That one was D5. So when I click the check mark there, notice it has that FX. That is a function of this other dimension. So if I come in now and change that dimension, they update together. So whatever I put over here is the same dimension that will appear over here, so that this rectangle is fully constrained. I'm going to change it back to 2.750. It does tell us in the bottom right corner that we are fully constrained. So we can finish that sketch. Want to use that sketch to create an extrusion, as we did in the previous lesson. Bring the mouse cursor in over the part. Notice I have two regions that I can select. Want to click on that rectangle that we drew. It defaults to coming out of the part and creating extra material out the front, but that is not what we want. We want to use the second option under here. Under output, we want to cut. I don't want to do the 2.5 inches from before. Let's just make that 2 inches so it doesn't go all the way through. With that done, we click OK, and that feature is complete. Use our F4 to orbit around and look inside the part. See, I've got these two inside corners. I want to do something with those. I want to add a fillet, give that dimension of 0.25, click that edge, and we can see through the part with the fillet command. And click that line. They got both of those edges on the inside of that pocket, and say OK. The last major feature that we want to add to this I want to put a couple of holes through this area right here. Click on that face, and I can start to desketch. I can use this option right here, which is create sketch, or I can right click on it and say new sketch. Any of those work. This back in our window where we can get a good view of it. Again, we're making holes here, so we're going to draw points. Put in a couple of points in the middle of that face, right click and say OK. Now I could dimension these to position them to be centered left to right, but I can also use the vertical constraint up here. First thing I want to do is constrain both of these points to be vertical to each other. Right click, say OK. Notice now that they move back and forth together. But I also want to lock them vertically within this pocket. I'm going to use the vertical constraint again. Come down to the front edge of that pocket and see it picks up that center point. Click that center point. Click one of my 2 points, right click, say OK. Now they can move up and down, but they cannot move left to right. It tells us we have 2 dimensions that are needed. I need to lock in both of these points, top to bottom. Dimension off the front edge, make that 0.5. Dimension off the back edge, make that 0.5. We are fully constrained. Our points have turned black. Everything is locked in place. Right click, say OK. Right click, finish sketch. And we're ready to put in the holes. It automatically locates our holes. I want to use the tapped hole feature before we use just a plain through hole. Now I want to make a tapped hole using the ANSI unified screw threads. Size is 0.3125, which is 5/16. On this drop down we can pick our actual thread pitch. This is 18 threads per inch. I want the threads to be full depth in that hole, and I want that hole to go all the way through the bottom of the block. All of those options selected, we say OK, and we have tapped holes through the block. One last thing to do to this, as we did at the end of lesson 2, we can come in and add maybe some chamfers to the edges, just to clean up that block a bit. F4 to rotate around, see all of the outside edges. I think we've got everything there. Let's do these 2 on the top. Maybe I don't like it being 0.125, make it smaller. 50 thousandths chamfer on those corners. That looks like enough for this one. I'm going to finish this part. We'll hit save. Call this one lesson 3. Go practice some of that. Again, just same kind of things that we did in lesson 1. You can extrude all the way through. You can extrude and stop. You can sketch on faces. Go practice some of those things. Develop a little bit of muscle memory with that. And then come back for lesson 4.